In the late 1930s, the United States Army Ordnance Department maintained a series of studies concerning infantry anti-tank measures. Reports circulated through the Infantry Board at Fort Benning and the Ordnance Proving Grounds at Aberdeen describing the limitations of existing rifle grenades and light artillery in addressing armored vehicles encountered at close range. Memoranda dated 1938 and 1939 recorded the need for a portable device capable of delivering a shaped explosive charge by an individual soldier. Concurrently, chemical warfare laboratories at Edgewood Arsenal conducted controlled tests on hollow charge effects against steel plate, documenting penetration values at varying standoff distances. These findings were distributed within restricted channels without public announcement. By 1940, experimental launch tubes and electrically fired rockets were assembled under the supervision of Captain Leslie Skinner and Lieutenant Edward Ewell. Test reports from Aberdeen in May and June of that year described a smoothbore tube constructed of steel, open at both ends, fitted with simple sights and an electrical ignition circuit powered by dry cell batteries. The rocket projectile carried a high-explosive anti-tank warhead employing a shaped charge liner. Field notes recorded successful penetration of armor plate exceeding the thickness of contemporary light tanks. The device was assigned a provisional designation and forwarded for troop trials. During the same period, U.S. Army planners monitored developments in Europe through military attaché reports. Communications from Berlin and Paris in 1940 included descriptions of German armored formations operating with speed and concentration, supported by infantry equipped with anti-tank guns and magnetic charges. These reports were circulated within the War Department and referenced in subsequent training directives. No mention of a shoulder-fired rocket launcher appeared in German equipment summaries at that time. In the summer of 1941, limited production of the launcher commenced at several contracted facilities. Ordnance Department correspondence listed the item as rocket launcher, 2.36-inch, M1. Training manuals printed in August of that year outlined procedures for loading, aiming, firing, and immediate post-firing actions, including cautions regarding backblast. Distribution records show that initial quantities were allocated to infantry units undergoing stateside training. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, expedited shipping schedules were established. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, serving as Chief of the War Plans Division and later as Commanding General of U.S. forces in the European theater, received periodic briefings on new infantry weapons entering service. Notes from staff meetings in early 1942 referenced the availability of the rocket launcher for close anti-tank defense. Eisenhower's headquarters issued directives emphasizing the need for infantry units to familiarize themselves with all issued weapons prior to overseas deployment. By mid-1942, American units stationed in the United Kingdom began receiving shipments of the launcher. Quartermaster logs recorded crates marked with ordnance codes and handling instructions. Training exercises conducted in rural areas of England included live-fire demonstrations against derelict vehicles and steel targets. Observers from Allied armies attended some of these exercises, and liaison officers forwarded summaries to their respective commands. The first recorded combat employment by U.S. forces occurred during operations in North Africa in late 1942. After-action reports from units landing in Operation Torch included references to the launcher being carried ashore. Engagement summaries described encounters with German and Italian armored cars and tanks in terrain that limited the use of heavier guns. In several instances, infantry platoons reported firing the rocket launcher at short range, noting penetration and damage consistent with test data. Ordnance officers collected expended tubes and warhead fragments for examination. German intelligence units operating in North Africa compiled battlefield reports on captured equipment. A document dated December 1942 from a Panzer Division intelligence section described an unfamiliar American weapon recovered near a destroyed vehicle. The report noted a tubular launcher and a rocket projectile with a hollow charge warhead. Sketches and measurements were included. The report was forwarded through channels to higher headquarters for technical evaluation. As fighting continued in Tunisia, additional German reports referenced the presence of the American launcher. Medical Corps records included notes on injuries consistent with shape charge effects. Panzer maintenance units documented damage patterns on armor inconsistent with standard anti-tank gun fire. These observations were transmitted to ordnance research establishments within Germany. In January 1943, the German Army Weapons Office circulated an internal memorandum acknowledging the appearance of a new Allied infantry anti-tank weapon. The memorandum instructed frontline units to recover intact examples when possible and to report any encounters. No countermeasure guidance was included at that time. Meanwhile, U.S. forces continued to refine the launcher. Field feedback led to modifications, including the M1A1 variant, which simplified production by removing the battery-powered ignition in favor of a magneto. Ordnance change notices were distributed to depots and units. Training pamphlets were updated accordingly. As preparations for operations in Europe intensified, Eisenhower assumed command of Allied forces in the Mediterranean and later in the United Kingdom. His staff maintained files on weapons performance. Situation reports from Italy in 1943 mentioned the launcher being used in mountainous terrain and urban areas. Infantry reports described engagements with German tanks at close quarters, often within built-up areas where lines of sight were limited. German units in Italy reported similar encounters. Intelligence summaries from Army Group South referenced an Allied rocket launcher employed by infantry. Technical annexes described the weapon's effective range and penetration based on observed effects. Recommendations were made to instruct tank crews to remain alert to infantry at close range and to employ accompanying infantry to clear buildings and terrain. In late 1943, German ordnance laboratories completed a preliminary analysis of captured launchers. A technical report detailed the construction, ignition system, and warhead design. The report included penetration tests conducted on German armor plate. Distribution of the report was limited to relevant departments. Subsequent correspondence discussed the feasibility of developing a comparable weapon. During the same period, U.S. Army units in the United Kingdom prepared for amphibious operations. Training schedules included instruction on employing the launcher from landing craft and in beachhead conditions. Engineering manuals addressed the hazards of firing from enclosed spaces. Eisenhower's headquarters issued operational orders emphasizing coordination between infantry and armor during assaults. On June 6, 1944, U.S. forces landed in Normandy. Unit diaries from infantry regiments recorded the presence of rocket launchers among assault equipment. In the days following the landings, reports described engagements with German armored vehicles in hedgerow country. Several reports noted the use of the launcher against tanks appearing suddenly at close range. Damage assessments were included in annexes. German after-action reports from Normandy referenced increasing encounters with Allied infantry using rocket launchers. Panzer crews reported attacks from concealed positions. Maintenance units documented armor perforations and internal damage consistent with hollow charge impacts. Intelligence officers compiled these accounts and forwarded them to higher command. By July 1944, German field manuals were updated to include warnings about Allied infantry anti-tank weapons. Instructions emphasized maintaining distance from suspected infantry positions and employing suppressive fire. No mention of a specific designation was included, but descriptions matched the American launcher. As Allied forces advanced through France, Eisenhower's headquarters received regular summaries of weapons performance. Ordnance officers attached to field armies compiled statistics on launcher usage, ammunition expenditure, and reported effectiveness. These summaries were factual compilations without commentary. German forces retreating eastward continued to encounter the weapon. Reports from the Western Front in August and September 1944 included references to losses attributed to infantry-fired rockets. Technical sections noted that the weapon was portable and could be employed from unexpected angles. In response, German industry accelerated development of its own infantry anti-tank rocket weapon. Internal correspondence from late 1944 described prototypes undergoing testing. Some reports referenced the American launcher as a comparative example, citing observed characteristics. During the Ardennes offensive in December 1944, U.S. infantry units again employed the launcher in winter conditions. Unit logs recorded firings at German armor along forest roads and in villages. Ordnance maintenance records noted issues with propellant performance in cold weather and documented corrective measures. German reports from the same period described losses to close-range infantry attacks. Intelligence summaries compiled by German Corps headquarters listed the American rocket launcher among encountered threats. These summaries were factual enumerations of equipment and incidents. As Allied forces crossed into Germany in early 1945, encounters continued. Reports from U.S. units described firing the launcher against fortifications and vehicles. German civil defense records included notes on damage to buildings consistent with rocket impacts. Throughout this period, Eisenhower's role remained that of overall commander. His headquarters maintained comprehensive files on operations and equipment. Communications bearing his signature addressed logistical distribution and training priorities, including ensuring adequate stocks of infantry anti-tank weapons. By the spring of 1945, German ordnance reports acknowledged widespread Allied use of the launcher. Technical assessments were circulated internally. No public statements were issued. The sequence of reports, field notes, and technical documents from both sides recorded the presence and use of the American rocket launcher in multiple theaters. These records, produced contemporaneously, documented the weapon's characteristics, employment, and the reactions of units encountering it during ongoing operations. By early 1943, the U.S. Army Ordnance Department maintained continuous correspondence with field commands regarding the supply and handling of rocket launcher ammunition. Shipping manifests from ports on the eastern seaboard recorded crates containing 2.36-inch rockets labeled for overseas theaters. Instructions attached to these shipments specified storage conditions, inspection routines, and lot tracking. Depot records in North Africa and the United Kingdom confirmed receipt and redistribution to infantry divisions according to tables of equipment authorized earlier that year. Training circulars issued to U.S. infantry units emphasized standardized procedures. These documents detailed firing positions, minimum safe distances behind the launcher, and coordination between the gunner and assistant. Range reports compiled by training officers documented accuracy data at various distances and angles. These reports were filed without narrative commentary and transmitted through command channels. In Tunisia, February and March 1943, American infantry divisions engaged German armored elements during counterattacks near Kasserine and subsequent operations. Unit journals noted the presence of rocket launchers at company level. After-action annexes listed instances where rockets were fired at tanks emerging from defile or moving along roads. The records included time, location, number of rounds fired, and observed effects. Ordnance recovery teams collected fragments from impact sites and forwarded them to base depots. German panzer divisions operating in the same area compiled technical summaries of battlefield damage. Maintenance battalion logs included sketches of armor penetrations and internal spall patterns. These documents were forwarded to German Army Weapons Office representatives attached to the theater. Some reports identified the cause as an American infantry rocket weapon based on recovered debris. By April 1943, German intelligence officers issued guidance to frontline units instructing them to report any further encounters with this weapon. Field intelligence forms included checkboxes for new enemy infantry anti-tank device, reflecting the administrative handling of such information. These forms were processed through standard channels without additional narrative. In May 1943, U.S. forces concluded major combat operations in North Africa. Inventory records compiled afterward listed quantities of rocket launchers remaining serviceable and those requiring repair or replacement. Ordnance maintenance units reported wear patterns on launch tubes and ignition components. Recommendations for minor design adjustments were submitted to the Ordnance Department. During the planning and execution of operations in Sicily in July 1943, U.S. assault units again carried rocket launchers. Landing force equipment lists included the weapon among essential infantry items. Beachhead reports described instances of firing against fortified positions and vehicles encountered near landing zones. The reports listed results without evaluative language. German units defending Sicily filed after-action summaries noting Allied infantry employing shoulder-fired rockets. Intelligence sections documented the use of such weapons in urban areas and along narrow roads. Captured examples were shipped to mainland Germany for further analysis, accompanied by standardized capture reports. As the Italian campaign progressed after September 1943, U.S. and Allied infantry frequently operated in mountainous terrain and built-up areas. Daily situation reports from U.S. divisions referenced rocket launcher usage during engagements with German armored vehicles positioned along roads or within villages. These reports included ammunition expenditure figures and maintenance notes. German Army Group reports from Italy included similar references. Tank unit logs recorded damage attributed to close-range infantry fire. Intelligence annexes included diagrams of attack angles. These documents were circulated internally. In October 1943, German ordnance engineers completed additional testing of captured American rockets. Laboratory reports detailed explosive composition, liner material, and penetration results against standardized armor plates. Distribution lists attached to these reports showed limited circulation among weapons development offices. Meanwhile, U.S. production of the launcher increased. Factory inspection reports from late 1943 recorded output figures and quality control data. Serial number ranges were documented. Ordnance acceptance reports indicated compliance with specifications. Training commands in the United States incorporated lessons learned from overseas into updated manuals. Revised publications dated November and December 1943 included clarified safety instructions and simplified diagrams. These manuals were distributed to units preparing for deployment. In the United Kingdom, American units assigned to the upcoming cross-channel operation conducted extensive rehearsals. Training schedules listed rocket launcher drills as part of platoon exercises. Live-fire tests were conducted on ranges approved by British authorities. Observation reports recorded performance metrics. German intelligence services in Western Europe monitored Allied training activity through aerial reconnaissance and agent reports. Summaries compiled in late 1943 noted increased infantry training intensity but did not specifically identify individual weapons beyond general categories. By early 1944, German defensive planning along the Atlantic coast included assessments of potential Allied infantry anti-tank capabilities. Staff studies referenced previous encounters in North Africa and Italy. These studies were circulated among coastal defense commands. On the Allied side, Eisenhower's headquarters issued logistical directives ensuring that adequate stocks of rocket launchers and ammunition were staged in southern England. Port records listed deliveries by date and unit destination. These records were maintained by quartermaster personnel. In February and March 1944, U.S. infantry divisions conducted final exercises incorporating armored support. Observer reports from these exercises included notes on coordination between rocket launcher teams and rifle squads. These notes were forwarded to higher headquarters as routine documentation. German Army Weapons Office correspondence from the same period discussed ongoing development of indigenous infantry rocket weapons. Technical memoranda referenced observed Allied equipment characteristics. These memoranda remained classified within German military channels. On June 6, 1944, U.S. assault units landed on the Normandy coast. Unit war diaries recorded equipment landed, including rocket launchers. Initial contact reports described sporadic use against bunkers and vehicles encountered near beach exits. Damage reports were compiled. As fighting moved inland, U.S. infantry operating in bocage terrain frequently encountered German armor at close range. Company and battalion after-action reports recorded rocket launcher firings during such encounters. These reports listed coordinates, times, and results. German units defending Normandy recorded similar engagements. Panzer Regiment logs described losses attributed to infantry rocket attacks from concealed positions. Intelligence officers compiled these accounts and forwarded them to Army-level headquarters. By July 1944, German field directives addressed the threat of Allied infantry anti-tank weapons. Instructions emphasized combined arms coordination. These directives were distributed to frontline units. Allied advance reports from Operation Cobra and subsequent movements across France included continued references to rocket launcher usage. Ordnance summaries compiled ammunition consumption figures. Maintenance units reported routine servicing. German retreat reports from August 1944 included notes on equipment losses and encountered enemy weapons. Intelligence annexes listed the American rocket launcher among commonly observed infantry arms. Throughout this period, Eisenhower's headquarters maintained centralized records of operations and logistics. Staff sections compiled daily summaries including weapons status. These documents reflected the administrative flow of information without commentary. In September 1944, Allied forces approached the German border. Infantry units continued to employ rocket launchers during engagements along fortified lines. Reports included firings against pillboxes and vehicles. German defensive reports from the West Wall referenced Allied infantry rockets impacting fortifications. Engineering assessments documented damage patterns. As autumn progressed, weather conditions affected operations. U.S. maintenance logs noted moisture-related issues with rocket ammunition packaging. Corrective actions were documented. German ordnance correspondence from October and November 1944 included further analysis of Allied infantry rocket weapons. Technical drawings were updated. Distribution remained internal. By December 1944, both sides had accumulated extensive documentation regarding the presence and use of the American rocket launcher. These records continued to be produced in real time as operations proceeded, reflecting ongoing encounters and administrative responses during the conduct of war. In December 1944, Allied and German forces engaged in large-scale operations in the Ardennes region. U.S. infantry units deployed along forest roads, villages, and ridge lines documented the continued carriage of rocket launchers at platoon and company levels. Unit equipment status reports compiled before and during the German offensive listed the number of launchers on hand and the quantity of rockets issued. These reports were updated daily as losses, malfunctions, and resupply were recorded. During engagements in wooded terrain, U.S. after-action reports described rocket launcher use against German armored vehicles advancing along narrow roads or emerging from forest cover. Reports included firing distances, number of rounds expended, and observed mechanical damage. Ordnance personnel attached to divisions logged launcher tube damage, cracked insulation on ignition wiring, and misfires attributed to cold temperatures. Maintenance instructions were circulated addressing battery warming procedures and storage practices in winter conditions. German Panzer and Volksgrenadier units participating in the Ardennes operations compiled parallel documentation. Tank battalion logs recorded losses from infantry-fired weapons at short range. Damage assessments noted penetrations on side and rear armor. Intelligence summaries prepared at corps level categorized the American rocket launcher as a standard infantry anti-tank device encountered during the fighting. These summaries were transmitted through established reporting channels. By January 1945, as Allied forces stabilized positions and resumed offensive operations, U.S. logistical systems resumed regular resupply of infantry weapons. Quartermaster records documented delivery of replacement launchers and ammunition to forward depots. Ordnance field depots logged inspection results for returned equipment. Serviceable items were reissued following inspection. In the same period, German ordnance offices continued evaluation of Allied infantry weapons. Technical reports dated January 1945 detailed comparative tests between captured American rockets and German experimental warheads. Test data included penetration measurements against armor plate and observations on explosive behavior. Circulation lists indicated distribution within weapons development branches only. As Allied units advanced eastward through Belgium and into Germany, operational reports continued to reference rocket launcher employment. Infantry regimental journals recorded engagements with German vehicles positioned in villages and along road junctions. Reports included sketches of firing positions and approach routes. Ammunition expenditure tables were appended. German defensive units operating within German territory compiled reports on encounters with Allied infantry. Civil defense authorities documented damage to buildings and infrastructure caused by infantry weapons. Some reports included references to rocket impacts based on blast patterns and debris. In February 1945, Allied forces conducted river crossing operations. Engineer unit reports described coordination with infantry carrying rocket launchers to neutralize enemy vehicles covering bridge sites. These reports included timelines and equipment usage logs. German units defending river lines filed after-action reports noting losses to infantry attacks. Intelligence sections compiled equipment encounter lists that included Allied rocket launchers. These lists were standardized forms used across commands. Throughout February and March 1945, U.S. infantry divisions continued to submit periodic weapons effectiveness summaries as part of routine reporting. These summaries listed weapon types, number of engagements, and maintenance issues. No evaluative statements were included. The documents were archived at Army and theater level. German Army Group Headquarters issued internal bulletins addressing the continued presence of Allied infantry anti-tank weapons. These bulletins reiterated existing tactical instructions. Distribution was limited to subordinate commands. As Allied forces penetrated deeper into Germany, U.S. reports documented encounters with increasingly varied defensive positions. Rocket launcher use was recorded against armored vehicles, field fortifications, and improvised obstacles. Unit logs included notes on launcher employment in urban rubble and confined spaces. Safety incidents were documented in medical and accident reports. German municipal authorities compiled damage assessments in towns affected by fighting. Engineering reports described structural damage patterns. Some reports referenced hollow charge effects without further analysis. In March 1945, German ordnance correspondence included status updates on domestic infantry rocket weapon production. Memoranda referenced ongoing trials and limited fielding. Comparisons to Allied equipment were noted in technical terms. U.S. production and distribution of rocket launchers continued uninterrupted. Factory output reports for the first quarter of 1,945 listed quantities accepted by the Ordnance Department. Serial number tracking continued. Shipment schedules to European ports were maintained. Eisenhower's headquarters continued to receive consolidated reports from subordinate commands. Daily situation summaries included logistical sections listing infantry weapon status. These summaries were compiled by staff officers and circulated internally. As Allied units reached the Rhine and crossed into central Germany, infantry combat reports continued to include rocket launcher engagements. Battalion logs recorded engagements with armored vehicles attempting local counterattacks. Ordnance teams recovered launcher components from combat zones as part of routine battlefield clearance. German military records from March and April 1945 reflected declining material resources. Reports continued to list Allied infantry rocket weapons among encountered threats. Documentation remained administrative in nature. In early April 1945, U.S. infantry units operating in urban environments such as Cologne and other cities recorded rocket launcher use against vehicles positioned within streets and courtyards. Reports included maps and photographs attached as annexes. German city defense units submitted final reports documenting equipment losses. Intelligence annexes included standardized listings of enemy weapons observed. As operations continued toward the Elbe, U.S. divisions maintained routine reporting cycles. Weapons status reports continued to list rocket launchers as part of authorized equipment. Maintenance logs recorded routine servicing. German Army Weapons Office files from April 1945 included final technical notes on Allied infantry weapons. These notes were filed alongside other ongoing documentation. By late April 1945, large-scale organized resistance diminished in many areas. U.S. infantry units continued to document equipment usage until hostilities ceased in their sectors. Rocket launcher ammunition stocks were inventoried. German surrender documents and administrative records included inventories of captured and abandoned equipment. Some inventories listed Allied rocket launchers found in depots or battlefield areas. Throughout this period, documentation from both sides reflected continuous administrative recording of weapons encountered and used during ongoing operations. These records were produced contemporaneously as part of routine military procedure during the conduct of war. In late April 1945, U.S. Army field commands in central Germany continued to compile daily journals, strength returns, and equipment status reports as operations moved across remaining river lines and road networks. Rocket launchers and 2.36-inch ammunition remained listed in infantry company property books. Battalion S 4 sections reported quantities on hand and recorded resupply requests through established channels. Ordnance maintenance sections noted launcher condition by serial number when repairs were undertaken, including replacement of firing mechanisms and inspection of launch tube integrity. On April 30 and May 1, 1945, U.S. units operating in multiple sectors reported localized engagements involving German vehicles and self-propelled guns attempting movement between towns. Engagement records included short-range rocket launcher firings from infantry positions along roads, behind rubble, and from building corners. Reports included the number of rockets fired and the immediate mechanical results observed on the target. Medical sections recorded blast-related injuries to friendly personnel and incidents where firing occurred too close to obstacles or within confined areas. These reports were filed as accident entries and forwarded according to standing procedures. German Field Command still operating in early May maintained situation reports and equipment lists. Where armored vehicles remained operational, unit logs recorded fuel status, ammunition status, and mechanical condition. Damage reports in these logs included entries noting penetrations attributed to infantry hollow charge weapons, described in technical terms such as point of impact, penetration diameter, and internal damage. Intelligence sections at divisional and corps levels continued to compile listings of enemy infantry weapons encountered. These listings included the American shoulder-fired rocket launcher, described by physical characteristics and observed effects. On 2–4 May 1945, U.S. military police and civil affairs detachments documented the capture of depots, warehouses, and municipal stores. Inventory sheets compiled during these actions listed weapons and munitions found. Where Allied rocket launcher ammunition stocks were located in captured areas, U.S. records focused on safeguarding, reissuing, or consolidating supplies. German depots captured intact sometimes contained technical files, manuals, and captured equipment. Intelligence exploitation teams cataloged documents and equipment. Logs from these teams included entries for German technical reports and drawings relating to infantry anti-tank weapons, including references to captured Allied launchers and German domestic equivalents. During the first week of May, headquarters messages circulated regarding the handling of prisoners, protection of supply lines, and consolidation of front lines. U.S. Army communications continued to include logistical data on ammunition, including rockets. Distribution points maintained records of daily issue and return. Ordnance disposal units recorded the collection of expended rocket casings and unfired rockets recovered from abandoned positions. Standard demolition and disposal procedures for damaged or unsafe rockets were recorded in engineer and ordnance reports. German civilian authorities in several areas compiled damage assessments for buildings and infrastructure affected by fighting. These assessments were prepared for local administration and, where functioning, for higher governmental offices. Forms included descriptions of structural damage, location, and apparent cause when identifiable. Some entries described impacts consistent with hollow-charge munitions based on the presence of localized penetration and internal blast damage. These reports did not identify the weapon by name but described the physical traces. By 7 to 8 May 1945, as surrender conditions took effect in different sectors, U.S. units recorded ceasefire compliance and established control measures. Infantry units inventoried weapons at company and battalion level. Property books were updated to reflect losses, remaining stocks, and transfers. Ammunition dumps compiled closing inventories including counts of 2.36-inch rockets by lot number. These inventories were forwarded to higher supply commands. German military units in the process of surrender compiled inventories of remaining equipment for turnover. Where such inventories were completed, they included weapons, vehicles, and ammunition. Some records referenced captured Allied equipment retained for evaluation. In certain cases, Allied personnel recorded the recovery of captured U.S. rocket launchers from German stores. These recoveries were documented by serial number and condition when possible. In May and June 1945, U.S. theater headquarters issued directives concerning the collection of enemy documents and technical equipment. Technical intelligence units were assigned to search ordnance factories, research facilities, and depots. Reports from these units described recovered German prototype and production infantry anti-tank weapons, as well as files comparing them with Allied designs. These reports included photographs, measurements, and translations of technical notes. The American rocket launcher was referenced within these captured materials as an item previously encountered and tested. Allied technical intelligence reports recorded these findings as part of systematic exploitation procedures. During occupation duties, U.S. infantry units continued to maintain their issued weapons. Training and safety regulations remained in effect. Rocket launchers were retained in unit arms rooms or stored in controlled depots depending on unit orders. Ordnance personnel conducted inspections for long-term storage, including cleaning, corrosion prevention, and removal of defective components. Ammunition storage procedures continued to require segregation by lot, inspection for damage, and reporting of defects through ordnance channels. German civilian police and emerging administrative services documented the presence of abandoned munitions. Reports included unexploded rockets and other ordnance. Allied explosive ordnance disposal teams responded to these reports, documenting each clearance action with location, type of munition, and disposal method. These reports included entries for 2.36-inch rockets found in former combat zones, dumps, or abandoned positions. Disposal reports were completed on standardized forms and filed. Within U.S. Army administrative records, after-action compilation continued during summer 1945. Divisions submitted consolidated operational reports covering their campaigns. Annexes in these compilations included weapons lists and summaries of ammunition expenditure. Rocket launcher entries in these annexes typically listed total rounds expended and the number of launchers held during the reporting period. Ordnance sections appended maintenance summaries listing repair counts and common faults, such as ignition problems, tube damage, and site misalignment. German technical personnel employed under Allied supervision in certain factories were interviewed by technical intelligence officers. Interview reports recorded statements on weapons development, manufacturing processes, and test procedures. Where German infantry rocket weapon development was discussed, reports included descriptions of design lineage, production timelines, and test results. References to captured Allied launchers appeared in these reports in technical context, including mention of comparative trials and study of warhead construction. These interview reports were filed with attached identification data and were circulated within restricted intelligence channels. In U.S. Army supply policy communications, decisions were recorded regarding the redistribution or return of equipment to the United States, including rocket launchers. Port shipment manifests from late 1945 listed quantities of launchers and ammunition shipped back or transferred to other theaters. Storage depots in Europe maintained records of retained stocks. Ordnance Department circulars addressed inspection standards for returned equipment. In Germany, local authorities continued to report weapon discoveries and explosive hazards. Allied headquarters issued public safety notices regarding unexploded ordnance. Civil affairs files included translations and distribution records of these notices. Clearance operations remained ongoing, and reports continued to record the recovery and disposal of rockets among other munitions. As administrative systems stabilized, U.S. Army historical sections collected documents, unit journals, and reports. Archivists and records officers compiled indexed collections. Rocket launcher documentation, including training manuals, field modifications, and after-action references, was included among these materials. The collection process was recorded through accession logs and catalog sheets. In the course of these post-combat administrative actions, the rocket launcher remained present within inventories, technical intelligence files, and maintenance records. References to German reactions to the weapon continued to appear in captured documents and interview summaries in the same factual form in which they were originally recorded, describing observed effects, recovery procedures, and technical evaluations during the period of ongoing operations and immediate occupation. In late 1945, U.S. Army theater supply commands in Europe continued to maintain accountability for infantry weapons remaining in depots and unit stocks. Depot ledgers listed rocket launcher, 2.36-inch by model and serial number range were recorded. Ammunition registers listed rocket rounds by lot number, quantity received, quantity issued, and quantity disposed. Ordnance officers submitted periodic condition reports noting corrosion, packaging damage, and defects discovered during inspection. These reports followed standard formats and were routed through ordnance channels to theater headquarters and to the Ordnance Department. Transportation sections compiled loading plans for rail and motor movements of ordnance stores. Movement orders for equipment included rocket launchers and rockets assigned to return shipments, redistribution within the occupation zones, or transfer to other commands. Port documentation at Antwerp, Bremen, and other controlled facilities included manifests listing ordnance categories and quantities. Documentation for each shipment included seals, tally sheets, and receiving acknowledgments. Within occupation units, arms rooms maintained inventory cards and issue logs. Company supply personnel recorded the presence of launchers on hand, including those held for training or reserve. Unit training schedules in some areas included familiarization and safety instruction for newly arrived personnel, recorded on training forms and weekly reports. Safety bulletins continued to repeat backblast precautions and ammunition handling rules. Reports of accidental discharge, misfire, or injury continued to be filed under existing procedures, including witness statements, medical entries, and equipment inspection results. Explosive ordnance disposal detachments operated across former combat zones and storage areas. Daily work sheets recorded calls received from civil authorities, locations visited, types of munitions recovered, and disposal method used. Entries included 2.36-inch rockets found in abandoned positions, in rubble, or in depots damaged during late war fighting. Disposal records included whether the rocket was unfired, damaged, or partially burned, and whether it was destroyed in place or moved to a demolition range. These entries were forwarded as routine reports to Engineer and Ordnance Headquarters. Technical intelligence elements continued systematic exploitation of German weapons plants and research locations. Field teams produced site reports containing maps, photographed equipment, and inventories of machinery, tooling, and stored components. When infantry anti-tank weapons were present, reports included descriptions of tubes, sights, firing mechanisms, warheads, and packaging. Teams cataloged captured documents by file number and location. Translation sections produced typed summaries in English of selected German technical papers. These summaries contained measurements, material descriptions, and test results presented in technical language. Among the German documents collected during these actions were evaluations of captured Allied infantry weapons, including the American rocket launcher. In several recovered reports, German test personnel described receiving captured launchers and rockets through established channels, recording serial markings were present, and conducting controlled firings at armor plate. These reports documented penetration figures, angles, and observed damage patterns. In some files, German authors included diagrams of the American launcher's ignition and electrical components in earlier models and the simplified firing system in later variants. Technical notes described warhead construction, liner shape, and explosive fill based on disassembly and chemical examination. These documents were filed as internal memoranda and laboratory records and were not written for external publication. In addition to written reports, German training materials captured in late 1945 and early 1946 included pamphlets and directives addressing infantry anti-tank defense. Some contained sections discussing enemy weapons by description. Where the American rocket launcher was referenced, it appeared as an item to be expected at close range, with instructions emphasizing movement discipline, infantry screening around armored vehicles, and avoidance of predictable routes in built-up areas. The captured materials recorded these instructions as part of routine training guidance. Allied intelligence summaries noted the presence of these references and logged the documents for archival handling. Interview programs continued under occupation authority. Technical interrogation teams compiled questionnaires and conducted recorded sessions with German engineers, ordnance officers, factory managers, and test range personnel. Interview reports were written in a standardized style, listing the interview date, location, names, roles, and the topics covered. Where infantry rocket weapons were discussed, interviewees described development processes, production constraints, and test procedures. In a number of interview reports, German personnel stated that captured Allied weapons had been examined and fired during development and evaluation, and that field reports from the Western Front had been used to inform training guidance and engineering adjustments. These statements were recorded as interview content, with the reports indicating when information was based on personal involvement or on office records. U.S. Army Historical and Records sections continued collection of wartime documentation. Divisional and corps records were boxed and labeled for shipment to theater record centers. Cataloging sheets listed unit journals, after-action reports, intelligence summaries, and ordnance annexes. Within these collections, references to the rocket launcher appeared in equipment lists, ammunition expenditure tables, and incident reports. Photographs and film records from training and combat were also logged, including imagery of rocket launcher teams during field exercises and in operational settings. Accession records described the content categories and the originating unit. In the United States, the Ordnance Department continued to receive field feedback and inspection data through formal channels. Circulars and technical bulletins were issued addressing parts replacement, inspection intervals, and handling procedures for stored launchers and rockets. Depot-level maintenance manuals included specifications for gauges, tolerances, and repair steps. Production and procurement files recorded ongoing manufacturing decisions for the launcher and its ammunition in the context of post-war inventory requirements. These files included quantities produced, quantities retained, quantities declared excess, and quantities allocated to training or to Allied assistance programs where authorized through official channels. In occupied Germany, U.S. and Allied authorities maintained controls over weapons and ammunition. Local directives and police coordination records addressed collection of arms from civilians and former soldiers. Collection points maintained intake logs listing weapons types received. EOD units continued to be tasked to clear ammunition caches. Reports from these operations occasionally listed Allied rocket launcher rounds among mixed stocks when captured material had been stored together during the last months of fighting. Each find was recorded by location, quantity, and disposal or transfer method. At the same time, U.S. Army training and doctrinal commands compiled operational lessons in the form of field bulletins and instructional memoranda. These documents, issued within military channels, included updated guidance on infantry anti-tank measures. References to the rocket launcher appeared in sections listing authorized weapons and their employment procedures. The writing style remained procedural, listing steps, safety measures, and coordination requirements with other arms. German civilian reconstruction offices continued damage documentation in areas heavily affected by fighting. Engineering surveys listed structural repair needs and noted unexploded ordnance hazards in building sites and agricultural land. Where hollow charge impacts were identified in damaged masonry or steel structures, reports described the physical characteristics observed. These reports remained administrative records for reconstruction planning and safety. Through late 1945 and into early 1946, the documentary record across U.S. supply systems, unit files, technical intelligence collections, and German capture documents continued to include routine references to the American 2.36-inch rocket launcher. The references remained in the form of contemporaneous lists, test data, maintenance entries, and procedural instructions. German reactions recorded during the war appeared within captured intelligence reports, maintenance logs, and training directives in the same administrative language used at the time, describing the weapon's presence on the battlefield, the recovery of examples for evaluation, and the handling of observed damage in unit reporting systems.